All right. I am here live in our amazing group, and I would love to know if you guys can hear me okay, if you could see me, and if all of the tech is working okay. So please, if you are tuning in, if you're seeing this video, post in the comments to this video that you can hear me and that you're here. And introduce yourself briefly if you'd like to. So your name, where you're from, and maybe just some emojis to represent what you're feeling right now. All right, awesome. A is saying, I can hear and see you perfectly. Awesome, love that. I am going to be referring to you anonymously. I want you to know that I'll use the first initials in answering any questions that you might have. Awesome, I see your comments. So this really is a space where I invite you to be part of the conversation. All right, so as you are trickling in, I also invite you to add something pleasurable to your experience today. So while you're listening, we're having this conversation, what's really crucial is that we're adding a little bit of pleasure to our day. So if there's something that you'd like to get, maybe some tea, some water, maybe something to keep warm, a blanket of sorts. I've got my tea here. And as you'll find, we'll be really talking about the importance of creating a sense of safety, a sense of pleasure in our system. So take a couple of seconds, a couple of minutes to go grab something that's going to make you feel extra comfy and extra ready for this conversation. Beautiful. I'm so glad that so many of you are here. I'm just scrolling through the comments now. We've got someone from Winnipeg, Canada. Fantastic. From Scotland, England. Awesome. Now, some of you may be tuning in later for the replay of this conversation. And so I absolutely encourage you to also comment as you're watching this video. If you're watching the replay, you can even hashtag replay before you comment, and I will make sure to get back to everybody's comments on here, any questions that you might have below this video. So please do be part of the conversation. Fantastic. We've got A from the UK. I'm so happy you're here. We've got I from India, P from the UK, England. Fantastic. Okay, so hi and congratulations for being here. We likely have either talked before on Instagram over DMs, or you may have been following me more silently on Instagram stories, and I'm so glad that we're being in this space now more personally in this group, in this community that I commit to continue to grow and to be here for you as a resource in the journey of overcoming vaginismus. And why do I say congratulations? Congratulations because it took something for you to be here today. I want you to really take a moment and tune in, and some imagery might come, some thoughts, words might come about the events, the circumstances that you had to endure in order to actually still be on the journey to finding answers. If you resonate with that, if you feel those heartstrings pulling, all of those moments where you could have given up and you didn't, and you're here, you're continuing to show that commitment and love for yourself, I want to really honor and celebrate that because I know it took something. If that resonates, put some hearts in the comments. Let me know that sounds significant to you, because a real big part of being able to overcome vaginismus does include to be able to honor ourselves for the things that we have been through and survived through thus far. So, celebrating you, and thank you for being here. I also want to talk about our intention for these next 3 days. So why did I decide to make it over a 3-day period? Thank you for the hearts. Awesome. I'm glad that resonates. So the 3 days are going to be dedicated to the three pillars that, from my experience, have been pivotal in overcoming vaginismus. And I'll share a little bit about my story in a minute. But each day will be dedicated to one of the three pillars. Today, we are starting with, by far, in my opinion, the most important pillar in the process, and that is all about emotional healing. I know that I made the mistake in my own journey of overlooking this part of the process and wanting to jump the gun and go straight to the aspects that we may have heard to be most relevant from perhaps the medical professionals that you've seen with being given dilators. I'll share a bit more details about what that looked like for me, but if you could resonate where, the first time you went to look for answers to a medical professional, or even the internet, that's what the conversation really focuses on is, okay, take these were the ones I used. Take these and just stick them up there and stretch yourself out and just use the smallest one and then move on to the next one and move on to the next one. And that's how we do it. I mean, that, although is technically accurate, makes up about 40% of the journey, if not less than that, because it's important that we actually create a sense of safety first before we ever get to dilating. So, and this sleeve, by the way, if you've seen this sleeve before, please comment your thoughts about this. This set is a very, very common one that's being recommended in the offices of medical professionals, unfortunately. I see A loves the Berman dilators. That is awesome. I'm so glad to hear that that was your experience. Unfortunately, from the people that I've spoken to, that's not the most common experience, simply because I, speaking for myself, I found them to be very uncomfortable as a plastic dilator. But perhaps some people do prefer plastic, so it's awesome, A, that these worked for you. When I saw this sleeve for the first time, I thought it was rather scary, and it definitely discouraged me from wanting to try dilating as a process for myself. Yeah, right? A looks scary. Maybe you got the set that doesn't come with the sleeve, or maybe it was an earlier set. But this is the box that I remember my parents actually coming to the house and they got me my dilator set, and this is the box that they come in. The ones from Intimate Rose are fantastic. Yes, M. Those are a very highly recommended set that I encourage people to get. They are incredibly comfortable, and they actually look like this. So comparing the smallest dilator from the Intimate Rose set to the smallest dilator in the Berman set, you can see the difference. The Intimate Rose one is the equivalent of a pinky, while this one is the equivalent of about 2 fingers of mine, and that's the smallest. So when it comes to dilator set recommendations, we're going to talk about the depth of dilating in our day 3, which is all about the physical healing journey. So today we're starting with the emotional. Yeah, it looks like a cactus or a medieval torture device, says E. The Inspire silicone ones are wonderful as well. They're the ones that are curved, if you've seen that. And we seem to have quite a bit of agreement that the Inspire silicone set is great. Yeah, one of my one-on-one clients is using those, and she really loves them. So I mentioned the intention and day 1 and day 3, but what is day 2 all about? Well, day 2 is going to be all about us coming to find our authentic sexual self, and really the conversation around pleasure. Because for so many of us, part of the reason why vaginismus has been an experience, and I like to call it a body response rather than a condition or a disease or something outside of ourselves that we seem to be at the whim of. I like to call it a body response because in my system, and for a lot of people that have kind of heard the difference in this, it is more empowering to know that it is our body acting in a certain way and just responding to our external circumstances, meaning we can train that response to be slightly different and to guide our body in the right direction rather than needing to overcome a condition or get fixed or cured. So if that resonates, I invite you to adopt the body response terminology and even refer to vaginismus as something you're experiencing as opposed to something that you have. Why is that? When we use the word have and we create a sense of this is mine, I own this, it is part of who I am, we're actually assigning vaginismus to be part of our identity. And we don't want to own that. We want to separate vaginismus as something that is happening with our body, but not necessarily something that is us or that we have. And a beautiful teacher of mine, he refers to the saying of language creates reality. That's why it's called spelling, because language and words cast spells, so that the way we talk about ourselves, whether it is verbally out loud or in our mind where most of our self-communication happens, all of that is creating our reality. And therefore we want to create a most possibly nourishing and kind environment for us and for our body. So that's a little tangent. I hope that was helpful. E says, I love the term experience rather than have. I'm glad you like that. Yeah, it's powerful when we shift the way that we talk to ourselves and to our body, specifically parts of our body that we may have been disconnected from. That really makes a big difference. So back to day two. Day two is all about pleasure and the relationship we have to ourselves as an identity of a sexual being. And for many of us who, I imagine all of you here, pleasure and our relationship to pleasure has a big, is largely intertwined with how we experience ourselves. And often we tend to stray away from having experiences that would otherwise, supposed to be pleasurable because of all the pain that we've experienced. And it's very natural. Bringing pleasure back to our life experience and allowing the authentic part of ourselves to come out in that way is crucial in finding safety in our nervous system and therefore in the process of the physical relaxation. We can't miss out on that. Yeah, Jay, this is going to be saved. You can watch this as a recording whenever you'd like. Great question. So the other piece I wanted to mention with that is, as human beings, the way that we make decisions is we either move towards pleasure or we move away from pain. These are literally the two options in life in how we make choices in our everyday lives and also in our sexual experiences. So of course, we have been moving away from intimacy, and you may have found that many forms of intimacy have become something that you find yourself avoiding or resisting because, like was the case for me, they continuously are just a reminder of what we can't yet do and how we may perceive ourselves to not be good enough. And therefore, you might start to avoid, a dating situation if you're currently not in a partnership, or even holding hands or kissing because you know where it leads. Can someone resonate, or does someone resonate with that? Let me know. Yeah, A says yes. So we naturally move away from the pain or we move towards the pleasure. And a big pillar of overcoming vaginismus that we'll discuss again in day two is how can we infuse more pleasure in our life while decreasing the level of pain we're experiencing, both physical pain and emotional pain, by the way, so that we can start to recreate a positive association of sex and intimacy for ourselves and decrease the resistance we might have to certain activities like self-pleasure, like other forms of sex with a partner, and dilating. Totally, yes, I definitely feel that absolutely resonates. Yeah, you guys feel me. Part of the passion here and why I'm really doing this is because I remember where I was and not having a community in which we can talk about this stuff. And there's so many intricacies to the healing journey. It is not a straight line. It is not a one size fits all. Yes, there are main pillars, main principles, but there's just so much to it. And today we'll talk about a lot of the non-standard topics in the emotional healing journey, the intricacies that are important to be top of mind so that you can navigate the complexities of the challenges vaginismus brings. And that's why we're here together. I wished there were more resources when I was going through the process, and I believe that in any way that we can make a change in life, in our world, based on our challenges, it's kind of our responsibility to do that for everybody else following in our footsteps. So I'm so glad you're here and we're doing this together. Yeah, community makes such a difference, A says. P says, I didn't date for years because of it. And it's okay, I'm glad you're here, A. You're joining us, fantastic. So community, yeah, community makes such a difference. I like to say that so much healing becomes available when we realize we're not alone. And I remember I wrote about this on my website, the experience of laying in bed at night and just asking myself the age-old question. Tell me if this resonates. Why me? Why me? What did I do to deserve this? And those statistics that we see online on the internet, which I recall being vaginismus affects 1 in every 1,000 women, or people, vulva owners, right? More accurately. And that brings a sense of loneliness like no other, and hopelessness, especially when that hopelessness gets confirmed by a medical professional who doesn't seem to know about vaginismus and therefore can't be very helpful. And the person that we go to seeking for answers gives us this sense of, you're alone. I don't even know, even though you trusted me to know, but I don't even know. So there you go. It just goes down the drain. Yes, this live will be posted when it's over. So S says, why is my vagina broken is a common thought. Yeah. Why is my vagina broken? Why am I broken? And we create this identity of being broken, which has a slew of side effects in the other parts of our life, like our sense of confidence, our self-love. And the vaginismus journey, above all, is a journey to self-love, self-acceptance. Physical relaxation is part of it, but without getting to that emotional healing that we'll be talking about today, it's impossible, in my opinion, to have the physical healing journey be effective. So I want to share a bit more about how I've come to that conclusion and why emotional healing is so important, why we're starting with that on day 1, by sharing a little bit more about my personal story. And please, if you could relate to any aspects of this as I'm speaking, comment below in the comments and just let us know, so again, we can feel less alone as a community. And D says, I like saying I am whole instead. Yeah, I love that. Later on, we're going to talk about the power. We already kind of talked about the power of words, but we're going to also talk about the power of the subconscious and the impact that the subconscious mind has on our behavior compared to the conscious mind, and why it's so important to create that programming of I am whole, I am enough, I'm healing, not only in our conscious mind, which does happen with certain things like affirmations, for example, but in our subconscious, which actually represents 95% of what drives our behavior in life. So affirmations are beautiful. I'm whole is fantastic. And if we can program that and have that be the foundation on a subconscious level, then we're making an incredible amount of progress in the healing journey. A says it's really hard to find resources at first and when you don't know what people call it. Yeah, the power of language again. Having a label for something, although sometimes labels can be damaging, Having a label for something is also incredible because it gives us a sense of relief of yeah, okay, there's a word for this. I'm not making it up, and it's not in your head, by the way. Who has been told by somebody in their life, maybe a partner, maybe a medical professional, that vaginismus is in their head? That was the case for me. There was a lot of doubt that got created by an external force to then internally for me to ask myself, is it all in my head? Should I try it again, see if it works, if it's going to be just as painful? And lo and behold, I did try it over and over again, and I just made the pain worse. Plenty of times, definitely. Yeah, A says me. Yes. Yes, all the time, says J. Okay. It's so unfortunate. Just relax is another thing. Yeah. So I'll share now a bit more about my story. That's kind of going to be explaining a little bit of this as well. He says, just relax. It hurts the first few times. Yeah, that expectation that unfortunately as a society we have been at the whim of, that the first time penetrative sex is going to hurt, creates the self-fulfilling prophecy, is one of the things that creates the cycle of pain and the experience of the body response of vaginismus. And it's so unfortunate how we grow up with that idea. Yeah, it hurts at first. Oh yes, exactly. At time I doubted myself if it's in my mind. Same, eh? So I first tried to have penetrative sex at 18 years old with my boyfriend at the time. And before that, there were some flags that were present in my life as experiences I had, especially around the use of tampons, that gave me an idea that something might be off, but I didn't look into it further. And so it was at 18 that I actually started my journey of finding answers for what was going on. So what happened with the tampons? I tried to use tampons when I got my period, and I got my period at about maybe 14, maybe 15, a little bit later than the average. And I remember going into the washroom with a tampon since I wanted to go swimming and trying to put it in first by myself. I didn't ask yet my older sister or my mom for help because I was hoping it's just gonna happen easily, as you see in other people's friends' experiences or movies and such. And that was just a no-go. It felt like there was a wall there. And also I doubted that I had a vaginal opening even at this point because I wasn't sure where it was supposed to go, and the pushing didn't seem to do anything. If I pushed too far and I started feeling the pain, that gave me like a legit, okay, no, I don't want to do this right now. And I remember the tampons going in the garbage one after the other as I either tried a couple on the same day, or then again, I thought, oh, this might be in my head. Let's try again. Maybe I feel better. And I was just wasting tampons. And to my perfectionist self, tell me if you could relate. Perfectionism is such a main theme as well in the experience of vaginismus. To my perfectionist self, losing the tampons and throwing out perfectly good tampons also made me feel worse. Yeah, Amy says, I felt like I was doing it wrong. Right, because we don't have the sexual education in our public schooling systems that is enough for us to have a pleasant experience of our puberty. In fact, it's all fear-based. Most of it is fear-based, at least 80% of it, and it only adds to the cycle of pain. As says, why does it look so easy in the movies? Was one of her thoughts, yeah. Yeah. So the tampons, and Jay says it's more than pain though. It's like something in your mind is setting off alarms telling you to stop even if you don't know why. Yes, it's that mental anxiety as well, where it seems like there's already a patterning that exists to having the fear in the first place, to the physical experience. So very often it's our anticipation that adds to and or creates the physical experience. M says, yeah, I felt bad for wasting a lot of tampons. Exactly the same experience. I was also confused because all my friends never had any issues, but I just couldn't. A says, OMG, exactly the same story. I panicked and almost fainted. I wish I was taught about vaginismus in health class. I wasn't even allowed to go to sex ed that was provided. Oh, that's so unfortunate. A, I'm so sorry to hear that. And P, yes, tears in the bathroom, feeling totally lost about it. Yeah, so in short, that was me as well. And I was so frustrated at the idea of being a woman, that I consider myself a vulva owner in the world, because it seemed like already at that young of an age, there's so many issues related to this. And then there's also, the fear of being pregnant in a sexual experience, which is one of the potential causes of vaginismus that creates the tightening response because we're scared of being pregnant. So after the tampons, I at one point later in my process, I was able to wear a tampon, but I actually almost fainted after a volleyball tournament doing that, walking back to my car. It just felt like my muscles went into an involuntary spasm that was very, very intense, and there's just so much pain from the tampon that I almost fainted. If anyone had the same experience, let me know. Yeah, and E says I never even tried to use tampons. I always thought it was because my mom just gave me pads, but now maybe it's because I knew it would hurt or expected it to, so I just avoided them. Very possible. My little sister that was 5 years younger didn't have any issues with tampons, saying I never attempted using tampons. Yeah, that avoidance of the tampons could have been present for you for many reasons, and we'll talk about the main categories of reasons today as well, as part of exploring the emotional healing journey. My mom and my sister weren't very helpful to me as well. Of course, they tried their best. They gave me verbal instructions. I believe my sister at one point also saw that I was trying to do it properly and in the same way that she was using them, and she's older than me, 3 years older. So yeah, I kind of gave up on tampons and I used pads for a very long time. Yeah, and then people would say, well, if you haven't tried, how can you know? But that's kind of doubting your life experiences. In a way, it's gaslighting, because we know we know what's up. We don't really need other people to doubt that. That must have been a really uncomfortable experience, Jay. So first time trying penetrative sex, what did that feel like? That felt like the wall again. And I was very excited to be trying penetrative sex with my boyfriend at the time. We had had other forms of sex, other forms of pleasure, touch, intimacy. But when we tried to have penetrative sex, I remember he was on top of me, and I was trying to guide his penis inside my vaginal opening, inside the vagina. And it was so closed that it seemed like there was no option whatsoever for it to go in. And then you realize, okay, well, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Let's try to relax. You breathe a little bit. You consciously try to give the intention to the pelvic floor muscles to open up. But it's not enough, largely because we have lived for many, many years prior to that attempt with having a disconnection to our pelvic floor muscles and having had the pelvic floor muscles be living in a tight state. So no matter how many times you've been told, oh, relax or do your breathing, it is years of conditioning in the physical body that has unfortunately led to that state of tightness. And so it's not as simple as just relaxing and breathing. And we'll talk about all the different layers of what physical relaxation looks like, so we can bring our body back into a state of balance and a state of safety, so that the pelvic floor muscles start to play on our team finally. So if you're feeling frustrated that you couldn't do it in the moment, please allow yourself to have that peace, that it was a result of many years of how your body was just learning to be for various reasons. A says, now I'm scared to use the menstrual cup. It's lying there unused for years now as well because of this. Yeah, A felt like a wall, like maybe I just wasn't ready. And also, as I'm petrified of using the menstrual cups, the size and the shape. Yeah. So after that, we realized that something is up, but of course we tried a few more times. And the next couple of times, maybe on the third time, his penis started to go in a little bit, but it felt like a searing, stabbing pain, as though somebody had taken a knife, put it over some fire, so it got nice and heated, and then started to insert it at me. Let me know if that's also how it felt for you. A says relaxing is hard when turned on and when someone is on top. Yeah, that dynamic of having someone on top and also therefore having us feel like we are at the whim of someone else. We don't have control over the situation, control over our life, can send us into that reaction of the tightening and the body really trying to keep us safe. That's a very big part of the emotional healing journey, is the realization and the sense of peace that comes, also anger, by the way. There's peace there and there's anger. That comes with knowing that the body is trying to protect us, because consciously we don't want it to protect us anymore. But deep inside, the body knows that this is the way that it's going to keep you safe. And therefore, it really has been on our team all along. We just need to come back to being friends with that part of ourselves and inviting it into a place of safety that wasn't present for it for many years during your life, and likely starting from the childhood. Yeah, many of you are saying that it was the same burning, stinging sensation. It would close my face to control with a pillow. I would close my face to control with a pillow. Yes. And the same with pap smears. Yeah, that was another red flag for me just after starting to become sexually active, that I was trying to go for a pap smear. So after that pain, I went to a medical professional, my family doctor, and I said that, I'm sexually active, but it's not working. And so he encouraged me to do a pap smear. The fact that he was male probably didn't help because of my personal experience in life that I'll share a little bit about. But on that first pap smear, I remember that my butt lifted off the table as he approached with the speculum. And that may be a very common experience as well, one that you've had, where your butt automatically lifts and maybe even your legs automatically close in an attempt to avoid that perceived danger. And I say perceived because our body and the way that we view the world is what creates our internal experience. So it's a perceived danger that creates the pelvic floor muscles from tightening. And the key then becomes in shifting the perception, where that is a place of neutrality and trust and safety, that action, rather than a perceived danger. So it's reversing the negative impact that we've had in our lives that's going to help as a pillar in the emotional healing journey. Yeah, sharp pain. As soon as I felt it, I reacted and needed it to stop. And I'm okay with pain. I've had several painful piercings. Yeah, so this kind of pain can be very different, and because it's associated to a very tender and vulnerable part of our body that may have also been doused in shame in life, it's a very different kind of pain. So if you have a high pain tolerance in other ways, know that you may still experience pain on the vulva or in the vagina in a very, very different way. D says, I had a nurse get angry at me during a pap smear because I couldn't relax my legs. Yeah, I don't really have words. I'm sorry you had that experience. On behalf of all medical professionals, by the way, who have not listened to you, who haven't believed you, who may have said things like just relax or have a glass of wine, or the worst one likely that I've heard, do you even love your husband? Yeah, on behalf of all of them, imagine them right now in front of you, and imagine me saying, I am sorry. You did not deserve that coming from their mouth. It's just a little conscious exercise. Of course, it only impacts 5% of our mind, since the subconscious is such a large part, but hopefully that brings a little bit of closure around that. Yeah. Okay. So my butt lifted off the table, the pap smear didn't work, and it was a long time later that I could have a pap smear with a baby speculum that was effective. But that doctor at first told me to just wait and that my body was likely not ready yet for penetrative sex. And again, I was 18 at the time, so it's not a very young age to be having penetrative sex in most cultures. So I was kind of surprised. And I waited a couple of weeks, came back to that same family doctor, and put my foot down and said, I need to see a gynecologist, or at least send me to the next person in line, because I want to see somebody who hopefully knows about this thing called vaginismus that I had already researched on the internet, but nobody had confirmed it for me as a diagnosis or as a label. So at that point, he gave me the drink a glass of wine idea, that I should try that and see if I relax more. And keep in mind, I was 18, so I wasn't even legal drinking age yet. And I found it to be pretty comical that I was getting that sort of recommendation from a medical professional that was illegal. Yeah, ugh. I think the vulnerability is a big factor for sure. Yes, Jay, vulnerability is massive. We're going to talk about this more tomorrow, but what I want to say now is that penetrative sex and sex in general is likely the most vulnerable thing that we do in life, and especially as vulva owners. Humans who, in order to have penetrative sex, need to physically accept another human being inside of us. That is the most vulnerable thing ever. So part of the pillars and the principle to overcoming vaginismus is the ability to feel safe amidst vulnerability and amidst specifically the unknown. Many of us in life have grown up where our survival strategy to keep us safe has been to be in control. Who can relate? For me, in order for me to be safe, to feel safe, I tried to cling on to control in the things that I felt like I can control in my life. And certain situations in my life, like a parental situation in which there was a lot of arguing while I was little, that didn't help me feel safe. And so I looked for things that I could control for safety. And when we come to a time in our lives in which we want to do an intimate act like penetrative sex, again, the most vulnerable thing in the world, we are still using our tried and true survival strategy of being in control of our life to try to be successful at this new thing. And this new thing, it requires us to feel safe amidst surrender rather than safe amidst control. 100%, yes, completely. Yes, I have a high desire for control. Yep. Absolutely, you can invite your partner to the live stream, but only if they're with you right now, because the group is absolutely secret. So I would need to be the one to invite any person within. So maybe they can watch the recording if they're not with you. So finding safety amidst surrender is huge. We're going to talk a lot more about that tomorrow. And it really is part of what is going to help us have our dilating journey be successful. What is going to help the physical healing journey be effective. It is when we create the foundation of safety in our nervous system and cleaning the slate of the past, because the past is filled with a lot of pain, a lot of emotional turmoil, and literally pollution, mental and emotional, that is being stored in our being, our mental body, our emotional body, but also our physical body. And we're going to talk about TRE a little bit later, which has to do a lot with this. So long story short, the gynecologist didn't have answers for me either. Vaginismus wasn't mentioned. I waited for a while to go see her, and unfortunately that wasn't very helpful. But it was later that I went to see a sex therapist through the benefits of my boyfriend at the time's parents. So he had a very fun conversation with them to allow me to use their benefits to go to see a sex therapist. And for me, the experience with a sex therapist wasn't very pleasant, very likely because I simply wasn't ready. I simply wasn't ready for the conversation that, in my experience with the sex therapist, had a lot to do with my self-pleasure habits as a kid. It seemed like she was trying to dig into my history and my past to identify the moment in which I became broken, in which something shifted, and really she was trying to provide an explanation as to why I was experiencing this sort of physical protection reaction. But it was done in a way that I wasn't comfortable with at the time. And so I only went to the sex therapist for maybe 2 or 3 sessions, and I felt icky. If the word icky can explain an experience you've had with a medical professional, please know that yes, it likely has to do with you in some respect. A fraction of that is simply the discomfort you experience with talking about the topic. And it is a medical professional's responsibility to create a nurturing environment in which the presence of ickiness is just not there. So that's, one of the red flags in seeing somebody is kind of advocating for yourself and really knowing whether they're a right fit for you in the way that you literally feel while speaking to them. I'm glad that wasn't my sex therapist approach. I'm sorry, thank you. Yeah, there are fantastic medical professionals out there. I want you to know that. Sex therapists, psychosexual in particular as well, pelvic floor physiotherapists, gynecologists can be amazing medical professionals out there. So don't get me wrong. That is just part of my experience. S says, yes, I often sat there wondering, did something have to happen to me, for me, to experience this, when I could think of nothing? It just was. Yeah, S. Yeah, and I know part of your story there, so that's very deep and totally. So the sex therapist, though, one of the beautiful things that happened is that she confirmed the body response of vaginismus is what I was experiencing based on my explanation of it. And that gave me a lot of peace, and it also gave me a launch pad from which I could take action. And because she told me about dilators. I had read about them online a little bit, but she gave me the recommendation to go buy them and to start the dilating process. Now, unfortunately, I got a 2-pager of instructions on how to use dilators, kind of like what I mentioned before when I showed you these bad boys over here with the huge rubber sleeve. And these dilators weren't the ideal ones to get, but more importantly, the instructions were just not sufficient. And that is where my passion with creating very detailed step-by-step video guidance on how to dilate, it's all PG-13, but very particular tips, tricks, guidance, angle of insertion, what the role of pleasure is, what to do before you ever pick up the dilator, and how to prepare your body. So key. But I wish you watching, you got the instructions that didn't have you go home, try it, and go, oh my God, this hurts. What else am I supposed to do? Like, how do I troubleshoot? Of course you don't want to do something that causes you pain. And my dilators sat in my closet for weeks, if not months at a time, in multiple phases of my journey, because they simply were a source of pain. And as you remember, we either move away from pain or we move towards pleasure. And there was no ounce of pleasure in the way that I was attempting dilating at first. Now, I later discovered the impact and the benefit of pleasure, and we'll talk more about that as well when we talk about dilating in particular, and tomorrow. So my mom asked if I was sexually abused. Yeah, that could be a category of reasons for which we experience vaginismus. A says, I got no instructions, just do it twice a day, every day. Yeah, and often not even about lubricant. Lubricant is so important. Pleasure, turn on is so important. I find it wild that we are told to approach dilating in a very medical way in which pleasure is not part of the equation. So it's like we're trying to get to a point where we could have pleasurable penetrative sex. But to get there, you're saying not to include pleasure in the practice. It doesn't make sense to me. And the reason why I encourage being sexually aroused does have very much to do with how the cervix moves up and down. We can talk about that on day 3 as well. But literally the relaxation experience that occurs when we are feeling sexually aroused in our body. The brain sends a signal to our pelvic floor muscles, our cervix, to move the cervix to move up and out of the way, making space for penetration, for something to come in, where the body is expecting a visitor up in there, rather than it being shocked by the touch at the vaginal opening because sexual arousal wasn't present. It didn't yet have the signal that there's going to be a guest visiting the vagina. My mom told me that I wasn't supposed to be turned on to do it. No lube was talked about. When I first got mine last summer, I tried them twice and then tossed them in a drawer until last month. It terrified me to use them. Yeah, very common experience. And my husband was frustrated that I wasn't regularly doing it because that's what I was told to do. I'm so sorry. As for the not supposed to be turned on to do it, I disagree. It is possible to be able to have penetration while you're not turned on for some people. And for some people who don't experience vaginismus, still absolutely required to be turned on in order to have an ease of penetration, in order to have a pleasurable penetrative experience. So yeah, turn on is a part of the equation, absolutely. And there can be shame associated with that, like was the case for me. I explained to the sex therapist that self-pleasure was always something that was doused in shame for me. And only later, through a particular practice that I teach in the emotional healing journey that originates from Tibet, I actually understood the source, the memory that created the shame related to self-pleasure. That's a very interesting story as well. It related to my grandpa and something that he said while I was playing with my toys in front of me on the carpet, but I was also playing with my clitoris at the age of around 6 or 7. And I guess I had just discovered the clitoris in my own body, this pleasure point. Of course, we'd want to touch what feels good. But my grandpa, in this memory that came back to me through this practice, he looked at me and he said, "Don't touch there." And so as a little kid, hearing that from someone you absolutely love and trust and respect registers as, oh, okay, this is the rule. Don't touch there. Don't touch there in private. Don't touch there in any other context in public. It's a no visiting area of my body. Got it. And from that point, I likely developed a very strong aversion to self-pleasure, where later in life, when I started to explore my body more, I didn't understand why I felt like I shouldn't be doing this. I didn't understand why it was not okay. But it was impacted by that event I had with my grandfather, who of course didn't intend to create such a cause of pain in my life, but it did partially contribute, and it happened that way. And this practice is incredibly powerful, from Tibet. And if you don't quite kind of picture what that looks like, it really has to do with meditation and sort of the monks that practice these kinds of things in Tibet to clean the slate of the past so as to create a fresh future. I'm just gonna catch up on comments here. I've had that when I said to my boyfriend, I'm starting dilating again. He just said, well, yeah, you need to sort it out. Oh, I'm sorry, E. Yeah, unfortunately, people who haven't experienced vaginismus, they simply can't understand. And even a beautiful intention there by somebody you love, the wrong things might come out of their mouth. Not making excuses or explanations for them. I'm just saying that, unfortunately, no one who hasn't experienced vaginismus can truly understand in my experience. You need to see someone. What are you actually going to do? Like, hold on, hold on. It's not so simple. Yeah, it really isn't so simple. And there are main categories of things to consider that hopefully you're finding value out of in these 3 days. I absolutely felt shame with pleasure for the longest time. Same. What's the name of this Tibetan practice? Great question. It comes from a teacher of mine. The name is Tibetan Cleaning, and I teach it in my online course on emotional healing, as well as the group program and one-on-one work. I don't know if you may be able to find some stuff on YouTube as well, but it's wonderful. And I kind of teach it in the context of vaginismus in particular, so it might be really helpful to check that out. I had the exact same response from my mom as a young kid as well. Yeah. So the rest of my journey had to do with a lot of trial and error, a lot of unnecessary pain, and pain that I hope that you avoid, because it lengthened the time it took me to overcome vaginismus and to today be able to have pleasurable penetrative sex like I never imagined was possible. One of you over the last week or two, I believe it was, asked me, I feel at times that it's just so far out of reach. Like, it's just not possible for me. I can't even imagine what it is like. And she asked me, was that the case for you? Because, you're on the other side now, but were you able to understand what the other side looked like at the time? Did you have that sense of certainty that it's going to happen? And I answered, absolutely not. I had no idea. I had no idea what's possible. I knew of the concept of what's possible, but I didn't think that it would be possible for me. And so I shared that because many of you may be in the same boat, thinking it's not possible for you at this point in time, maybe ever. And I hope that these words serve as inspiration, that I was in that place as well and I didn't think it was possible. And I just kept looking at the next little step, right? What is the next step forward? And don't get me wrong, I gave up many times. I was not doing this consistently in such a positive way that I talk about it now. But I hope that you set aside the end goal, the peak of the mountain, and hopefully can hold on to that sense of hope with each next step. Because one step after the other, it's going to start to feel like, hey, it's possible. Hey, maybe this could work. And it's that hint in the stage of, hey, maybe this could work. Look at how far I've come. When you're on, when you have the first dilator inside of you and you realize, oh my God, something is inside me. That's huge. When you get to wear your first tampon, or when you are experiencing pleasure in your body in a way that feels nourishing and safe and something to celebrate, rather than something that's full of shame and negativity. All of these milestones, even though they may not be absolutely physical in the way that penetration happens down the line, they're things to be incredibly proud of and to celebrate, so that you can continue that momentum of having that next win and that next win, until the next win is you and your partner attempting penetrative sex after having had the confidence and the certainty that, hey, I can do it with that same size dilator, which means I'm almost there. And when that moment happens, and when I receive celebratory messages, images as well, pictures of you being pregnant and later actually birthing a baby when you had experienced vaginismus before, like, those are the massive milestones that were created by each step, one at a time. So focus on the next step, please. P says, I have done the first meditation, look forward to strengthening the heart connection to then move on to the second, and I trust images may come to me as I haven't got clear images yet of what caused this for me. Yeah, so P is inside of the Pain-Free and Intimate Recipe, which is my online course. And that's beautiful. I'm glad that you're taking your time in the step-by-step guidance and the process that I teach in there, because she's referring to what some of the emotional healing practices go into with cleaning the slate of the past so that we can start to create a fresh slate for the future. The reason I use the word slate in that way is because every time we lay down, let's say we're attempting penetration with a partner, or we're even dilating in the process, what we're doing, unfortunately, is we are reliving the imagery that exists within us that is similar to the imagery that we're in the present moment. So let's say you're in bed with a partner. Unfortunately, the nervous system, the physical body, the mental body is actually in bed at the medical professional's office where you had your first pap smear. That was incredibly painful, and you bawled your eyes out and you swore to yourself, you're never doing this again. And even though we're in bed with a partner, we're experiencing a past painful event. So part of the emotional healing journey is working with those specific past painful events to be able to come to a place of peace and emotional clarity as to that event, so that we're not continuing to relive it over and over again. So we can, again, start with a fresh slate. So thank you, P, for sharing that. Yes, that is so encouraging that you also couldn't see it when you were in it. Yeah, please know that's absolutely true. Honestly, hearing stories of people overcoming vaginismus is so inspiring and reaffirming, even if it just sparks a tiny bit of hope. Jay, thank you for sharing that. And on the flip side, I also want to normalize the feeling that you may get when you read a success story, but you're not feeling hope or inspiration. And you're feeling perhaps even sadness, anger, grief, that there's somebody else who has had the success, but it's not you yet. And again, the key word is yet. But please know that having those emotions that are not all loving is okay. It absolutely is part of the processing of the emotional turmoil. And those ups and downs are going to be present no matter what. It's just a matter of sticking through them and having the appropriate support through them, so you're not letting that kind of build into another slippery slope of that nature emotionally. S says, I'm triggered as soon as I lay down to dilate. I can feel my muscles clench before the dilator is anywhere near me. Yeah. And on that, we're going to jump into a few categories of reasons you may be experiencing the clenching. Let's see if you could relate. Jay says, me too. The alarms go off as soon as I think about it or it becomes a reality. Yeah, okay. So to finish up my story, it was 6 years from the time I was 18 to the time I was 24, where at 24 I was able to have penetrative sex that was pain-free and pleasurable. At the same time, those are super important. Sometimes we may hear, okay, well, your goal is to be able to be a receiving partner to sex, to just be able to get that penis in there. But no, you want to be having an amazing sex life, pleasurable penetrative sex, not pain-free, not neutral, not I can bear this, I can handle this, I can do this for you, but this is pleasurable for me and for us. That piece of for me and doing the journey for you is very, very, very important. When our why, when our reasoning is tied around someone else's experience of life, someone else's pleasure, unfortunately, that isn't enough to, first of all, inspire us to be resilient through all of the challenges, but also it doesn't quite allow us to have that foundational level of love, acceptance for our own journey, our own body, and doing it for the love that we have for ourselves rather than just because we think we should or someone else told us to. And sometimes this could be a double-edged sword in relationship, because there's that additional pressure and stress that can come from another partner in the process of overcoming vaginismus, where you may find it harder to find that sense of, I'm doing this for me and for us, but for me as a priority. A says, yes, never knew what is pleasure so far. Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. When it's doused in pain, it just feels like it doesn't exist. So taking those baby steps and taking pain completely out of the equation, which is a golden rule in my dilating guidance, is very important. E says, I have been with my partner for 5 years and I keep reminding myself I have to do this for me, not just us. Yeah, beautifully said. We have to keep reminding ourselves. And sometimes the grass is greener on the other side. See if you can let me know if this is kind of the case for you. If you're in partnership, we sometimes wish, oh, I wish I wasn't in partnership so that I could have the freedom of being by myself through this, so that I don't feel the pressures that unfortunately a partner may bring, even unintentionally. And if you're not in partnership, you also might feel that the grass is greener on the other side, so that you could have that beautiful support of another human, knowing your story, not needing to go through a dating scenario with vaginismus being at the forefront of that interaction. Yeah, the grass can always seem greener on the other side. And I also want to celebrate the amazing partners that may have been in your life, whether right now or in the past, that have been supportive and have been a beautiful piece of your journey. I want to extend my thank you and gratitude to those people, because they can also be a fantastic pillar in your emotional, physical healing journey to pleasure, etc. Jay, got to do it for your own freedom. Absolutely. So when I experienced that freedom, and was able to have pleasurable penetrative sex, that was in many ways a surprise at the same time as being something I was certain was going to happen. And the reason I say this is because very often at the end of our process, when we are dilating and we are maybe, at our goal size, there is still that leap to, okay, I think I can do this, but I haven't done it yet. And so that leap is there no matter what. When I work with people, especially one-on-one, and we're having more personal interactions, I could really see the impact of this, because the certainty is there, the confidence is there with the dilators, perhaps with a partner using the dilators, which is a really nice way to do it if you're in partnership. But there's still a leap of faith at the end. And so I mention this because you may likely never feel completely 100% ready. That was the case for me. I didn't feel 100% ready, but I gave it a shot and it worked and it was fantastic. And the first time, it didn't feel like I was completely relaxed, completely myself, completely enjoying it, because of course there was a part of me that was worried it's not going to work again. And it was after the first penetrative sex experience that was successful, and by that I mean pain-free and pleasurable, that I started to allow myself to come out of my shell and to develop as a sexual being, as a sexual human, in a different way than the healing journey of vaginismus. And I realized that this piece, if I had started to bring it in sooner in my process, would have been super helpful in creating the progress faster for me than the 6 years it took. So that's why tomorrow we talk about finding our authentic sexual selves. This is part of what is very important to do while we're in it, as opposed to after having the first penetrative sex attempt that goes well, and then trying to discover who we really are as people who have sex and who are intimate with other human beings. So I only after that really stepped into who I had always been, but I had just forgotten I was, because of the intimacy being doused in pain. And I've learned a lot since that time that I'm trying now to bring in your experience, in your healing journey. The grass is greener where you water it. Yes, Dee. Fantastic saying. That is totally true. And again, it is about that mental inner dialogue as well, of how we perceive the world. D, my husband is so supportive and positive with my vaginismus, and I invite you to watch the word my vaginismus just to not make it part of your identity. But yeah, beautiful. Is that my husband and I have found many other ways to be intimate together. Yeah, fantastic. And A says, same with my partner. Awesome. Please extend my thanks to them. And I love that you say other ways to be intimate together. When in partnership, it's very important to take penetrative sex off the table for enough time to create intimacy within that partnership without the existence of penetrative sex, so that your body doesn't keep going back into and dipping into that cycle of pain over and over again. When maybe you possibly think, oh yeah, maybe we can try it now. Maybe we can do it now. I think I'm ready. But it's too soon, and you kind of dip into the same cycle of pain, and you have the vaginismus body response reactivate again. So the timing is key because we want to give ourselves enough time of creating that neutrality and that pain-free experience inside of the physical body, emotional, mental bodies before we attempt penetrative sex, just so we are sure that, well, almost sure, again, with that leap of faith, that it's going to be fruitful. So taking penetrative sex off the table, very, very important. Okay, so that kind of makes up my story, and I hope we've talked about a lot of different categories of things intertwined in there. And the next piece I want to share about is the possible causes of experiencing vaginismus that sometimes help us have a light go off that helps us make a connection and to have some sort of understanding as to why it's happening. Before we talk about the details of this, I want to say that it is not necessary to know why you're experiencing vaginismus in order to heal. It is not necessary. So often I speak with you and you say, I'm not sure why. S said that earlier. I really didn't understand why. And even if you don't, until the end of your days, it is very possible to still retrain the body response to vaginismus so that it can be put to the side, not part of your reality whatsoever, and go on with a pain-free and intimate life without knowing why. And we often beat ourselves up for not knowing why. But unfortunately for some of us, even though the curiosity really is there to understand, that answer never comes. And if we get hung up on trying to find the answer for too long, we may be using that precious time in not the most effective way. So if that's you and you're frustrated that you don't know why, and you're allowing that to slow you down with your next steps, I do invite you to continue making progress and perhaps finding out why in the most unexpected way. Or if you don't find out why, that's okay too. So on that note as well, what is trauma? Trauma in itself is anything that the body perceives to be, the body, the mind, perceives to be less than nurturing. So anything has the potential to be traumatic in our lives. Absolutely any event has the potential to be traumatic. It is not about the intention of the event. It is not necessarily about the nature of the event. All it is about is the impact and the effect that event had on your unique system. So for some people, an event may be traumatic, may lead to a creation of some sort of pattern, physical, emotional, mental, while for another person, that same event does not lead to that sort of experience in life. And again, this could be a source of anger and a source of frustration because we think about all these other people that had an absolutely terrible sex education and they didn't develop the experience of vaginismus. So yeah, anger, frustration is definitely there. But the message I'm trying to send across really is that it is how our body experiences the thing that happened to us, and it's not so much about the thing that happened to us. I bring that up because very often we may think we don't have trauma in our life when we may be thinking about the very obvious kinds of examples of trauma in a sexual context, when the truth is that we have experienced trauma in our lives and we do need to dive into that in a deeper way rather than brush it off of, oh, nothing's ever happened to me that was serious enough for me to pay attention to. So some categories of causes for experiencing vaginismus that perhaps you'll be able to relate to. If you can relate to each one of these, please do type that in the comments and we can share stories as we go. So one is, and trigger warning here, we're talking about the most obvious cause for experiencing vaginismus, which is sexual assault or molestation or rape. So of course that does create the body to want to, on our behalf, protect us from any further danger that we have experienced in that way with assault. And something I was talking with one of you recently was about the physiological reaction that may be present during sexual assault that is also present in another form of event that can be traumatic. And with sexual assault, the physiological reaction I'm talking about is actually the experience of pleasure. So many trauma survivors are incredibly confused in their own selves about why they experience an orgasm, perhaps, why they experience pleasure during such a thing that has been awful with a person that they didn't want to be inside them. And S says, fear of assault is so high up there for me. Yeah, and it can be so confusing that there's pleasure present with such a thing that you didn't want to be pleasurable. The other response that this is relevant in is the experience of tickling, actually. And tickling could actually have been very traumatic in your system, as in my online course videos, I talk about this for me as well, is that it may have created the sense that your body is not yours. Your body is not something that you control, and you likely were being held down, pinned down while you were being tickled against your will. And the physiological response with tickling is laughing. So it's hard for the person on the other side to know that you are serious when you say, please stop, because you were laughing. So in that way, tickling could have actually been traumatic. And what the body does is it then starts to associate any other human being coming at you to give you touch, for example, to touch your body, as this thing that you didn't want to happen in your body. And so we tense up, we tighten, and our pelvic floor does the very same thing. Let me know if that resonates in any way. It could have been tickling, it could have been something else that's kind of related to that. So another big category other than sexual assault is early exposure to pornography, or perhaps to a film that had a sex scene that looked incredibly violent. That was the case for me. I remember being at my best friend's house and there was a movie on the TV. Her parents weren't home, but they had left the TV on. And we both saw this sex scene in which the vulva owner was at the bottom and the man was thrusting inside, and it looked so violent to me that I recall that memory being a source of, wow, like that must hurt. Why is she letting him do that? And she was screaming, probably out of pleasure in the movie, maybe out of pain, but to me, in my system, that event registered as traumatic, as less than nourishing. And so I started to associate intimacy, and specifically penetrative sex, as a less than nourishing experience. And when that gets created in our bodies, of course we want to avoid that because we're moving away from pain. E says, tickling was a huge thing I hated as a child. Yes, Jay, I feel like we get exposed to so much now due to the internet and social media. Yeah, with more exposure comes more risk, for sure. So early exposure to pornography. Next is religious shaming. Religion can have such beautiful effects in the way that we are raised in so many ways, and unfortunately in the way of intimacy and sex. If we were taught that sex is dirty and shameful, it becomes incredibly difficult to be able to flip that switch of the way we were taught the world is. And we were taught the world is for, we're good in the world if we aren't doing sinful things. For so many of you that I speak with, that comes up on your wedding night, and it's like we expect that when we have a wedding band on our finger, we're going to be able to flip the switch of how our body perceived sex to be for many years, but that unfortunately isn't the case. So you likely can relate to religious shaming as well. My grandpa used to tickle me a lot, and although he didn't pin me down, I remember feeling a bit trapped in wiggling myself away from him as best as I could. Yeah, for me, it was hearing my parents have sex as a young child. It felt so violating because I never asked for it. Oh yeah, thank you for sharing, E. Yeah, this can be incredibly traumatic. And this can be the sole reason that you're experiencing vaginismus. There may be no other reason, which can come with a sense of peace as well. Definitely resonate with multiple of these. Jay says, yes, this caused me so much anxiety for me and I never knew why. E, Catholic shame and guilt. Yeah, a bit of that for me too, having been raised in Spain. So another one, the masculine being scary. That was the case for me. My parents fought quite a bit when I was young, and I unfortunately experienced a lot of fear around their arguments. And I registered a masculine male figure in my life as a source of danger. Now, even though this had nothing to do with intimacy, what it did have to do with was how I started to perceive men. And this kind of comes full circle to the male doctor I told you about. And from that perspective, the masculine being scary can have an impact on the way that we see men, the future partners in our life, even though we consciously know that we love them and we trust them and they are safe. The programming that we've experienced as a child creates the association that men are scary. I must protect myself. I must come into a ball. I must tighten because I cannot let this person inside of me. It is very sad how these things can have such a deep, deep impact in our lives. Elle says, yes, I grew up in a very conservative religious family. Sex was supposed to be reserved for marriage. I waited, but had spent my whole life till then repressing sexual feelings. You can't just flip a switch after a 30-minute marriage ceremony. Yes. A says, the masculine being scary is a big one for me. I went to an all-girls school and barely knew any guys until later in life. Yeah, I find that this is also a common experience that is shared among many of you. The next is that there's a sense of deprivation related to the feminine. And here I use the word masculine and feminine loosely. For me, this did mean, the gender that people took on, so penis owners and vulva owners. And for you, in whatever energy that you associate your gender to be in, whether it's more alpha energy, more omega energy, it is that sort of energy that you associate yourself with. If you saw a representation of that kind of mentor in your life, let's say for me it was my mom, I saw a bit of a repression of the feminine where she wasn't taking care of herself. She wasn't doing the self-care things that would have been evidence of love for herself. There was obviously a lot on her mind as she was going through turmoil in her relationship. And so this repression of the feminine and the deprivation of it may have created a way the world is and how I need to be in the world as a woman. And that didn't include, for a very long time, taking the time to take care of myself and to really nourish myself in that way. So that's a very big category. M says, I was absolutely terrified of my dad as a child. I have a better relationship with him now. He never physically hurt me or anything. He was just very explosively angry. I never would have guessed that could have contributed to my experience with vaginismus. Yeah, it may have, it may not have. And I see that as a very, very relevant one for me, and I imagine for you as well, because of the gender partner that I imagine you have now being a male figure that you are looking to let inside your life, but there is that subconscious deep resistance there that was created as a child. Being the youngest sibling at 5, 3 brothers, I was always, of 5 with 3 brothers, I was always made to feel like anything overly sexual and being interested in boys was wrong no matter what age I was. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, very interesting connection there. So some other categories. Being starved of loving touch. If you were being starved of loving touch due to any reason in life, this may have created a pattern to not give yourself loving touch, to feel like you don't deserve loving touch. And touch is one of the ways we nourish ourselves as human beings. So touch is just as important as food. And if as a kid, even you weren't picked up enough, you weren't given that sort of nourishment, it is very natural for us to start not to nourish ourselves as we grow older. And so we don't give ourselves the love through touch, through kind language, kind words. that helps in being at a balanced place when it comes to seeing ourselves as sexual beings and celebrating our bodies in that way. Then physical injury. On my website and on my blog, I've written about my injury falling on a bike when I was young and kind of falling on the metal piece between the legs. And this created a lot of pain when I was overcoming that particular injury, a lot of pain with urinating over the next week. It was such a sharp burning sensation. I know one of you in this community shared about her pain with urinating. And this in itself creates the association that the area between my legs as a kid, right, this pelvic floor, the vagina is a place of pain. Even though it was not related to sex, even though it wasn't related to intimacy, it was related to physical injury, and that may have created a patterning to associate that area with pain. Another thing, you must have sex to be good enough. If you have heard that in any way, shape, or form, that sex is this thing that we as vulva owners need to give to our partners in order to keep a relationship, in order to satisfy a partner, in order to be good enough in the world. If you've heard that, and that has become part of the way the world has been in our perception of it, because again, perception is what makes up our entire experience and our behavior, then this thing may have created a repression and a resentment about intimacy and sex itself. And that also ties back to the femininity we talked about earlier, because for me, I also repressed my femininity for a very long time. I had a lot of anger associated with not being able to use a tampon, periods being painful, and then later other things that were just related to what being a girl in the world was. As well, my parents were expecting a boy when they had me. The doctor told them I would be a boy. And later in life, they told me that they were expecting a boy. And they commented, it would have been really great to have a girl and a boy, because my sister is a girl. And they added, and of course, we're very happy to have 2 girls. Unfortunately, that even though, again, they were coming from good intentions, they didn't have the intention to have that commentary be traumatic. I may have taken that as, oh, they wanted a boy. They expected a boy, they preferred a boy, and they're not happy that I'm a girl. And what does that mean? Well, I'm not happy with myself for being a girl. And so the repression of the feminine starts to be created. I didn't really dress in the same way that I dress now. I was very much of a tomboy, which was so beautiful in many ways. But unfortunately, it was sparked by a lot of likely anger at the idea of being a girl, rather than the celebration of just wanting to be a tomboy for the purpose of being a tomboy. Jay, that concept is just ingrained into our world. Sex is everywhere. It's quite overwhelming. Yeah, it is. Now, another one that is quite interesting as a pattern is that many of us have challenges with swallowing pills. And let me know if you could relate. We had a big discussion about this on Instagram, but swallowing pills in itself is a penetrative act. And there are many food-related challenges that you may have experienced, because as we try to swallow pills, if you've had a challenge with that, you've experienced that your throat closes up. And it's the very same thing that happens with our pelvic floor. We're trying to penetrate from this way, our throat closes up because it's going into a similar reaction to how our pelvic floor muscles want to tighten, because the entire body system is trying to close and not have any invaders come inside. That's at least the way that I understand it. And I had the experience of having a lot of challenges with swallowing pills. And finally, fear of pregnancy. So the fear of pregnancy in itself may be the only reason that you're experiencing vaginismus. There's so much fear around that and not wanting to get pregnant too early. And the best way of contraception is for us to not allow a penis inside. That was a massive thing for me as well. I think it was one of the reasons that contributed to my experience of vaginismus. It's that fear of pregnancy. So finding ways in which you can bring a sense of safety and a sense of peace around pregnancy, where you are trusting your contraceptive method enough to allow a partner to be inside and to maybe ejaculate inside, that could be very helpful. And of course, some of the other emotional healing tools and strategies to overcome that particular fear, as with the fear of penetration in itself. So Dee said, I really struggle with swallowing pills. I hated when they would get stuck in my throat. Yeah, I've talked about what has helped for me. There's a highlight on Instagram all about swallowing pills. You're welcome to look at that. E said, yes, I've had an issue with textures of food. Interesting. I struggled for years, and only this year have I been able to take the smallest pills. Great win. That's a fantastic win, Jay, that you have had that milestone. I celebrate you for that. And there's more to come as well as possible. And yes, I had this very bad for so long, better now, but still not normal. And what is normal anyways? So it's all about, in these categories of causes, it's all about coming back to safety in relation to all of these. So fear of the masculine, coming back to safety. Fear of pregnancy, coming back to safety. And only with safety does curiosity become an option, and does pleasure become an option. A nervous system that doesn't feel safe has no access to curiosity about what could be. A nervous system that doesn't have safety be a foundation cannot in itself physically relax and cannot experience pleasure to such a degree. So the principle here is coming back to safety. And how do we do that when we've experienced so much trauma in life with all of these different events that have happened to us? Well, we need to reverse the impact. We need to reverse the impact. And like I used the terminology before, we need to clean the slate and start fresh, so that the same things that had triggered a reaction before halt in triggering the reaction. They may continue to happen to us or in our lives. They may continue to exist as events. But the key is, what is it that they set off within us? That the domino effect has stopped. So a nice evidence in a common example that I could relate to is, if parents are fighting, does that create the same sort of impact in my body now as it used to? No, because I've done a whole lot of emotional healing around that with certain tools, certain strategies. And in the context of vaginismus, when you're laying in bed and that dilator is coming in proximity, is your body, is your nervous system living in the moment of trauma related to past painful experiences? Or has it had a chance to start fresh and to recreate the perception around penetrative sex from a new place? That's why I say the emotional healing journey is incredibly important, because we need to do this first before we ever start to layer on additional experiences of penetration. If we're trying to layer on dilating experiences of penetration over top of past painful, traumatic events, it becomes very hard to erase the impact and then create the opposite experience. So we need to erase the impact first. And that's why emotional healing needs to happen first before you poke yourself with the dilator over and over and over again. Emotional healing before poking our wounds with a dilator. So A says, the thought of the physicality of pregnancy, childbirth, and the pain associated with those things always made me panic while I was growing up. I'd get sick at the thought of it. Yeah, I could relate to that. So we talked about what needs to happen, and I want to touch on how it happens and the kinds of things that have helped me and the kinds of things I've learned since my journey, tools and healing modalities that I use now in helping you in your journey. And one of the things we did mention was that Tibetan tradition and a practice which helps us take certain memories, even people in our lives, and come to a place of forgiveness and a place of acceptance and neutrality relating to those events, cleaning the slate essentially, so we're not reliving them over and over again. This is a practice that I teach in the online course in the emotional healing journey, and of course in working in groups with you or one-on-one with you. Another big one related to the emotional healing journey is working with the subconscious. So I already mentioned that the subconscious is responsible for 95% of our behavior. And I like to explain the subconscious as though it is a little black box. And this black box has been on record mode ever since we were tiny and up until about the age of 12 or 13. So anything we heard in the world, anything we visually saw, all the information that was coming in through our senses got registered in this little black box as the way the world was. So, in the example of hearing your parents having sex, and maybe that sounding violent or that sounding like it was impeding on your privacy, that may have created the programming of, it's awful for other people to be having sex so loudly, or this is registering as really shameful in my system, so I'm going to make sure that when I'm having sex down the line, I'm not being so open about it or so loud about it. Or, if you experienced a painful pap smear when you're younger, potentially even at 12, at 13, that registered as penetration is painful, I do not want to do it. So having said that, the subconscious mind at 12 or 13, it goes off of record mode. It already has all of the ways the world is in there, and it now goes on play mode. So from 12 to 13 onwards, it's just replaying what we have heard, what we have seen, and what we've learned about ourselves and the world and sexuality in particular. It becomes important to be able to dip back into the subconscious and to reprogram the ways that we have learned the world is that are not helpful in overcoming vaginismus. And this is possible to do. This is absolutely possible to do with certain healing modalities, and in particular, processes for subconscious belief change that ever since I did overcome vaginismus, not right away, but later in life I was introduced to, and I became trained to facilitate and experienced amazing impacts in my own self. And now with you, specifically, I've introduced this practice with one-on-one clients, because in a group online or in an online course, I can't do that since it's so personalized. But coming up as well, I'll be introducing this practice in a group environment where I'll be working with each one of you in the group one-on-one to actually bring you this sort of benefit from the subconscious belief change process. Because remember, the subconscious mind is kind of like it's a ship, and it's trying to go in a certain direction, but the programming that isn't helpful is like the anchors of the ship that are firmly slowing you down, holding you back. And it could be incredibly confusing because the conscious mind, the 5%, is like, yeah, I want to go this way. I'm pretty committed to this. I know what I'm doing. But the subconscious is creating that resistance. So it's crucial to be lifting those anchors and recreating those deep parts of ourselves that have been the cause of resistance. And that's why I found it really important to get trained in this, so that I can bring this specifically to the world of vaginismus and helping you create a pain-free and intimate life. And other than the subconscious, there's another big piece that is key in the emotional healing journey, just as it is key in the physical healing journey. And this is something else I've also been trained in, and this is called tension and trauma releasing exercises. So this process helps to release the emotional, but mostly the physical tension that's being stored in our muscles and in our fascia. And this happens through a tremoring response in the body, which looks like a gentle shaking. It feels very safe. It looks a little scary, but it feels very safe, especially when done with the help of someone. But in this way, with the tension and trauma releasing exercises, we're helping the trauma and the physical tension that's been stored in our muscles and fascia for many, many years to physically escape through the shaking, which creates an incredibly relieving experience. Resting after a session of TRE is fantastic. And emotionally, this can have a release as well. When I did TRE, the first time that I did it, after exploring it a bit, and I did it legit by myself at home, I experienced just tears and tears and tears coming out, and a sense of, it's like trauma was escaping me. I didn't quite know what it was related to, but it felt like a really nice relief after. So I include this sort of practice in my work with people as well, mostly because it's often such a mystery for us to release the pelvic floor tension that gets stored in the pelvic floor muscles. On day 3, we're going to talk about some of the pelvic floor relaxation exercises that are relevant, but TRE helps us release the tension from the inside out. So not through manipulation like massage from the outside in, not through stretching, again, trying to manipulate the muscles in some way, but through actually fatiguing the muscles, gently stretching the muscles, and getting them into this state where they feel safe to release from the holding pattern that they are used to. And that's the beauty of TRE, is that the body's wisdom starts to speak for itself. And the tension being released that looks like tremoring is actually happening in the most relevant parts of the body for you, depending on where you store the tension. And with us in this community, that very often is directly in the pelvis, but of course also connected to the legs, the lower back, the chest, even the shoulders. And our body's connected from the tongue all the way down into our toes. So TRE is incredible. Those are some of the main ways in which the emotional healing journey becomes a little bit more structured rather than all over the place. So the tools and strategies include cleaning the slate with some of the Tibetan techniques, the subconscious programming work, and tension and trauma releasing exercises. So on that note, I want to ask if anyone has any questions from everything that we've talked about so far. I'll be wrapping up and giving you some home play activities that I find will be really helpful in this masterclass. It's interactive, but also I would love for you to have something to take away to do tonight, and to be able to come back tomorrow with a little bit of home play that you get some value out of. So let me know in the comments if you have any questions at this point. And again, if you're watching the replay and you have questions, please do write them down. #replay and then write your questions, and I'll go back and make sure I answer. And while you're doing that, I'll let you know what your home play is. So in the email that you receive from me, you would have gotten access to your private members area. That's where all of my online courses live. And the first one of those online courses is called Putting Vaginismus in the Past, Foundations of Breaking the Cycle of Pain. This is where I'd love for you to go to access your home play activities. And if you're having trouble locating that, it is in your email in the confirmation for this masterclass, and you've got your link, your username, and your password there, where when you log in, you're going to see that you already have access to this first piece of my bigger online course that's called the Pain-Free and Intimate Recipe. So click into the Putting Vaginismus in the Past and go to the module that's called Turning the Cycle of Pain into the Cycle of Confidence. And there you're going to see some exercises, and I would love for you to go in, read through that series of, it's a document, so the series of sections in there, and do the practices for the first 3 categories. So that's belief, clarity, and courage. So if you do the exercises in the Now You for belief, clarity, and courage, those are the home play activities that I'd love for you to dive into before tomorrow, or at any point that you have a chance. And then tomorrow, or whenever you do them, I invite you to share what you got for clarity. In the clarity section, we're really trying to get in touch with what it looks like being on the other side, having overcome vaginismus. What is that clear vision for you? Because it is only when we can truly imagine and have some detail around what we want life to be like on the other side, that's when we can get really connected to our vision and our why for that vision, which is another piece of this. So please do share that in the community and get excited about what that looks like, because it is possible. It is something that you deserve. And I absolutely love you being here and you standing for that vision already by you watching this. So congratulations for that. And please do share so we can all get excited about each one of your visions and what a pain-free and intimate life looks like for you. So those are your home play activities if you choose to take on the challenge. Fantastic. So I don't see any questions come in. I'll answer the rest of them as they come in. And that is, in a sense, the conclusion of the masterclass. If you would like to stick around for the next 10 minutes or so, I also want to talk about a group program that we're going to be doing that will be starting in March. And if you feel like you're interested in learning more about it, I invite you to stick around for this conversation. And if not, of course, I'll see you tomorrow again in day 2 when we're continuing with stepping into the authentic sexual self part of the pillars of overcoming vaginismus. But the group program. So this is going to be a group journey in the exact same format as my one-on-one work with people so far. And that means we get to continue this sort of community feel in a very tight-knit group of people who are on board with spending the next 4 months together with me and together with the group in the program in the emotional healing journey. Pillar number 2, coming back to a sense of pleasure, experiencing our authentic sexual selves, and also going into the physical healing journey. So, Yi says, thank you, Katrin. Thank you so much. You're very welcome. I'll see you tomorrow. Yes, absolutely. So if you're interested in finding out more about the group, you're welcome to message me either on Instagram, Facebook, anywhere, and I'll send you more information. It really is incredibly transformational, and the group I feel was going to add an additional layer of feeling seen and sharing stories and encouraging each other, staying accountable to each other through this process. Of course, that means it's less of a time investment and effort, probably same effort investment, but less of a financial investment as well from the one-on-one experience. So you might find that this is a really great choice for you to sign up for this group that will be starting in March. One of you is already in. There's some others that are thinking about diving in and making 2021 really a shift year, a year of change for the better in life. P says, you offered so much today, it's rather late over here, so we'll watch the rest tomorrow, as I may be interested in the group program. Beautiful, of course. Get some rest, P. Thank you for being here. Q, thank you. Thank you so much for everything. So that really does conclude. If you have any questions related to the emotional healing journey, please pop them in here. Any questions about the group program that's starting in March, do let me know. I would absolutely love to support you more personally in this way and really dive into the aspects of your experience that are unique in leading you through the healing process and just guiding you and sharing what has worked for me and the kinds of things that I trust, even my heart, are also going to be incredibly valuable in your process in overcoming vaginismus. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, not for me, but for being here for you. And I hope that you found a lot of value out of this conversation. I look forward to continuing to support you in this way. And if you do choose for that to be the path that you take if that does resonate with you. You've probably noticed that I have a bunch of sticky notes on the wall there. These are all of the beautiful humans that I have supported and or continue to support as part of the online course, one-on-one work, and now the group program. So our family is growing, and I hope that you choose to be part of it if that resonates with you, of course. So have a great rest of your day, and I'm going to see you tomorrow for day 2 of the masterclass. Bye.